All right, listener, ready for another deep dive. Today we're looking at some research from two students, Kesser and Steen, for their Nature and Innovation assignment.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, and they're tackling some pretty big topics. So how people in cities experience nature,
Okay.
almost like it's a zoo.
Interesting.
And then also this disturbing thing about illegal raptor persecution.
Wow, that's quite a range.
Right. Like, what do those two even have in common? That's what we're going to figure out today.
All right, I'm ready to dive in.
Okay, so one thing that really stood out to me in their research was this idea that harming raptors and city folks, seeing nature as a zoo, might actually be connected.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Like, they're not just listing reasons why someone might do something like that.
Yeah.
They're trying to really understand the mindset behind it.
Okay.
And that's where this whole city nature as a zoo thing comes in.
Makes sense.
So basically what they're saying is that there's this disconnect between people living in cities and nature.
Right, a disconnect.
And, you know, I can see that. We have parks and green spaces, of course.
Sure.
But it often feels like curated nature. Like we're just observing it from a distance instead of really being in it.
You know, Kesser and Steen actually used a great example in their paper.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
This comic where nature takes over the city. And it really highlights that feeling of separation.
Yeah.
Like nature is something outside of our normal city.
We've built this wall between us and nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of walls, though, their research zeroes in on a very specific urban environment.
Oh, yeah.
Impact farm.
Impact farm.
Yeah, it's this hydroponic vertical farm in Copenhagen.
I've heard of hydroponics, but can you remind me what it is exactly?
Sure. So it's basically growing plants without soil.
No soil.
Nope. They use this nutrient-rich water instead.
Interesting.
And what makes Impact Farm unique is that it's all about education.
Oh, cool.
So they're not just focused on, like, you know, churning out as many plants as possible.
Yeah, right.
They want to teach people about sustainable farming and get them engaged.
That's great.
It's very different from those huge commercial vertical farms that are like super sterile and automated.
Makes sense.
So it's more like a living classroom where people can connect with nature even in the middle of the city.
So did Kesser and Steen talk to anyone involved with Impact Farm for their research?
They did.
Cool.
They interviewed 7 people with all kinds of different backgrounds.
Okay.
And different levels of experience with nature.
Interesting.
Some grew up surrounded by it, while others, you know, hadn't really been exposed to it much at all.
I see.
And all these different viewpoints really highlight how tricky it is to even define nature.
Yeah, because it's not like there's one definition everyone agrees on.
Right. And some of the things these people said were like totally contradictory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. For example, one person said that everything is nature.
Everything.
Including stuff humans make.
Wow.
But then someone else said that nature has to be wild and completely untouched by humans.
Interesting.
So it really shows you how subjective it is.
Right.
Like how we each perceive and define the world around us.
Makes you wonder what shapes our individual understanding of nature.
Yeah. Like, is it our childhood experiences or where we grew up or even just like our current environment? It's fascinating how one word can mean such different things to different people.
And you know those different perceptions have a real impact.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you look at how people interact with nature in a controlled environment.
Like Impact Farm.
Exactly.
Because one thing that stands out about Impact Farm is that they don't use soil.
Yeah. That's pretty fundamental to how we think about growing things.
Right. And for some people, that was a real sticking point. Like one of the interviewees, Camille,
Okay.
she felt super connected to the soil.
Oh, sure.
She believed it had this energy, a life force. And to her, hydroponics just felt wrong, like something was missing.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, it is.
It represents this more holistic view of nature, where everything is connected.
I see.
And then you have someone like Burke who's got this science background.
Right.
He's all about the reductionist approach.
Okay.
You know, he sees hydroponics as a way to make plants grow better.
Oh.
He's focused on measurable things and being able to control all the variables.
So we've got feeling versus like scientific observation.
Exactly, a clash of perspectives.
And this makes me think about my own little balcony garden. I'm definitely no expert gardener, but there's something so satisfying about getting my hands in the soil and taking care of those plants.
I get that.
It makes you appreciate the whole process.
Yeah, that interconnectedness.
Exactly.
And it brings up a big question that Kesser and Steen raise in their research.
Which is
it ethical to control nature to this extent?
Mm-hmm.
Like, by taking plants out of their natural environment and focusing only on efficiency and what humans need, are we losing something important?
That's a good question.
It is, and it's especially interesting when you consider what another interviewee, said.
Okay, what did they say?
Well, they described the plants in Impact Farm as having a different vibration.
Vibration.
Yeah, and they said they weren't as resilient or flavorful as plants grown in soil.
Oh, wow.
And that really gets to this deeper, almost intangible part of the connection between humans and nature.
Like something's missing.
Yeah, exactly. Like something vital is lost when we remove plants from their ecosystems.
It's like those plants are missing something they can only get from being in the soil with all its complexity and life.
Right. And it makes you wonder if we're truly replicating nature or just creating a simulation.
A controlled echo of the real thing.
Exactly. And this leads us to another fascinating aspect of Impact Farm.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
The relationships that develop within this controlled environment.
Between the plants.
Not just the plants, but between humans, plants, and even insects. Kesser and Steen observed this really intricate interplay going on between humans, plants, and insects in Impact Farm. Like, for instance, they saw this alliance forming.
An alliance.
Yeah, between humans and the plants against aphids. Where both are kind of relying on each other for protection.
Okay.
And they also saw them introducing these predatory insects.
Oh, like to fight the aphids.
Exactly. They called them allies.
Allies. That's cool.
It's like you step into this farm and you're right in the middle of all these complex relationships between species.
Even though it's a controlled environment?
Right, even though it's controlled.
It's like we're playing matchmaker for bugs.
Haha, kind of, but it makes you think.
Yeah.
How does all this compare to the symbiosis we see out in nature?
Like in natural ecosystems.
Exactly. I'm thinking of lichens.
Ah, yeah, the fungi and algae combo.
Right, they work together perfectly.
It's a great comparison.
And it brings up a really important point.
What's that?
The level of human intervention in nature. These symbiotic relationships, they develop over time.
Yeah.
Driven by survival and mutual benefit. But in Impact Farm, humans are the ones orchestrating everything.
Oh, okay.
Carefully choosing which species can interact and controlling how they interact.
So it's not as organic.
Not in the same way.
It's like we're imposing our own agenda on these relationships.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Instead of letting them just happen naturally.
And that makes me think back to what said about the plant's vibration.
Right. Like, are we sacrificing something crucial by being so focused on control and efficiency?
That's the big question Kesser and Steen are wrestling with.
I see.
They say that while hydroponic systems like Impact Farm are great for education and sustainable food, they shouldn't be the only way people experience nature.
Especially in cities.
Exactly.
So it's not just about having green spaces.
Nope.
It's about the quality of those spaces.
Right. What makes them truly enriching.
And to help us connect with nature on a deeper level.
Exactly. They emphasize engaging all the senses, allowing for those spontaneous encounters with nature.
I like that.
Think of wild learning spaces where kids can just explore, or organize trips to natural areas within cities where they can see how everything's connected.
I love that idea.
Instead of just looking at a tree, you're feeling its bark, smelling the earth, hearing the leaves rustle.
It's a completely different experience.
And it makes me think of my own childhood, spending hours exploring the woods, building forts, catching frogs. Those experiences really shaped how I see the world.
And Kesser and Steen, they believe that those kinds of experiences are so important.
Absolutely.
Fostering wonder, respect, and responsibility towards nature.
It's about recognizing that we are part of nature, not separate from it.
And that brings us back to raptor persecution.
Right, because that disconnect from nature.
That feeling of otherness.
Exactly. That could be a big reason why some people might harm these birds.
Even though it's illegal.
They're trying to understand those different perspectives on nature.
To figure out how to protect these birds.
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces.
Right. If we don't know why people are doing this, how can we stop it?
And it's not just about understanding the people who might harm raptors.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that everyone sees nature differently.
Based on their own experiences and values.
Exactly. So instead of just condemning people who harm these birds, we need to have a conversation, a real dialogue.
Help them understand why raptors are important.
Exactly. Education and outreach are key.
It's about building empathy.
Yes, helping people connect with nature on an emotional level.
Because when you understand something, when you feel connected to it, you're more likely to care about it.
And want to protect it.
Right. So we need to shift from apathy to empathy.
That's how we ensure the survival of all species.
Including our own.
Because we're all connected.
What impacts one part of the web of life affects us all. Okay, so we've talked about all these things influencing how we see and interact with nature, especially in cities, but what can we actually do about it? It feels kind of overwhelming. Like, where do you even start to bridge that gap?
Yeah, it can feel like a lot, but that's where individual action comes in.
Okay.
It's not about grand gestures. It's more about a change in mindset, making a conscious effort to reconnect with nature in our everyday lives.
I like that.
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like? I'm all for saving raptors and all, but I need some concrete steps.
Sure. One of the simplest but most powerful things is just cultivating awareness.
Awareness?
Yeah, start noticing nature in your everyday life.
Okay.
Train your senses to see the beauty in the little things.
The little things.
Yeah, like the patterns on a leaf or birds singing in the park, even just the smell of rain.
It's like hitting pause on autopilot and actually seeing what's around us.
Exactly.
But how do we go beyond just noticing? How do we turn that awareness into action?
Our everyday choices can make a big difference.
Okay.
Like how you get around.
Transportation.
Yeah. Could you walk or bike instead of driving sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah.
Choosing sustainable transportation not only helps the environment,
Right.
but it also lets you experience your city in a whole new way.
And connect with nature along the way.
Exactly.
I've definitely noticed I feel better when I walk instead of taking the subway. Like I'm more present, more aware of my surroundings.
And what about food?
Food, yeah.
Our food choices can definitely play a role.
Okay.
Supporting your local farmer's market is a great way to connect with where your food comes from.
Right, and the people who grow it.
And choosing organic produce reduces your exposure to pesticides.
And supports more sustainable farming practices.
Right?
This reminds me of when I tried growing my own tomatoes a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It was so humbling. I had no idea how much work went into it.
Yeah.
It really gave me a new appreciation for the whole process.
Yeah.
You know?
From seed to table.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the kind of connection we need to foster.
That understanding of where our food comes from.
And recognizing that interconnectedness.
It's a step towards appreciating the web of life that sustains us all.
And it's something we can pass on to future generations.
All right, Kesser and Steen talked about how important those early experiences with nature are for kids.
Absolutely.
So how can we make sure kids are getting those experiences, especially in cities where access to nature might be limited?
It takes being intentional, creating opportunities.
Like what?
Encourage outdoor play, organize family hikes or nature walks. Even a picnic in the park can make a difference. And advocate for more green spaces in your community.
More places for kids to connect with nature.
Yeah, it's about sparking that sense of wonder.
That we all had as kids.
Yeah, that curiosity about the world.
And like we were talking about earlier, that sense of wonder can help fight fear and misunderstanding.
Which can lead to things like raptor persecution.
So education is key.
Absolutely.
Teaching kids about biodiversity, the role of predators, the interconnectedness of everything.
It can help dispel myths and foster respect for all creatures.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
It is.
Cultivating awareness.
Yeah.
Making conscious choices. Advocating for change. And educating future generations.
That's right.
Sounds like a lot.
It is, but it's also empowering.
We can each make a difference.
Exactly. Remember, even small actions can have a ripple effect.
By connecting with nature ourselves, we inspire others to do the same.
And we become part of a bigger movement towards a more sustainable and harmonious relationship with the natural world.
So listener, what will you do today to reconnect with nature? Will you take a moment to appreciate the beauty around you? Choose a more sustainable way to get around, support your local farmer's market, or teach a child about the wonders of nature. The choice is yours and every action counts. Until next time, keep diving deep.